World War II, Europe was in terrible condition. Many different countries had sections of Europe. The US, England, France, and the Soviet Union started to divide these territories amongst themselves. The capital of mainland Germany, Berlin, was split into four different parts. The West Berlin was divided into sections for the US, England, and France under capitalist rule, while East Berlin was occupied by the Soviets under communist rule. These ideological barriers would soon become physical ones. In this documentary, I will explain that the people of East Berlin were strong and courageous. I will back my claims up with historical facts and evidence to prove my point. As a result of a broken system, the people of East Berlin were starving and didn't want to be under the oppressive rule of communism. Many people started to move to the West to see their families and saw it was flourishing. A lot of them stayed, realizing they could have a much better life there. This was a terrible thing for the Soviet Union since they were now losing population, and they knew something had to be done. Thus, the creation of the Berlin Wall, meant to trap the starving people of East Berlin in and deny them access to visiting their families on the other side. August 13th, 1961, the day the Berlin Wall was built, and the oppression of the people of East Berlin had begun. Families were separated and jobs were lost overnight. The wall began as a barbed wire fence, and it was protected by armed guards. In weeks, the wall was fortified with concrete, and another fence was set up in June 1962. Guard dogs, landmines, and watchtowers were added to fortify this area between the walls. This area became known as the Death Strip. If anyone were to enter this area, they would be shot on sight. Many people decided to take the dangerous route and cross the heavily fortified wall. Many people successfully crossed in very creative ways. Horst Klein crossed the border 60 feet above patrolling guards on a tightrope. Gunther Wiesel built a hot air balloon and crossed the border after 30 minutes. In 1966, Hartmut Richard swam across the Tallow Canal and then went back to help about 30 others escape. These people were among the 5,000 that managed to escape with their lives. However, some were not as lucky. The wall claimed 239 lives in total. Fast forward to 1975, the Soviets had completed a stronger version of the wall after 5 years of construction. They had added 45,000 sections of reinforced concrete, each 3.9 feet wide and 12 feet tall, each weighing 3 tons. Past this was 79 miles of fencing. For fortifying the Death Strip, the wall now also had 300 watchtowers, 3,000 guard dogs, 20 bunkers, and 65 miles of anti-vehicle trenches. All of this shows that the people of Berlin were incredibly courageous. Some escapees have different reasons than others, some to see family, some to find work, and some to just get a better life. But they all made the perilous journey through, under, or above the Death Strip. This shows that these people were either so desperate to get to West Berlin, or they just were not afraid to die. This further proves the point that the people of East Berlin were strong and fearless. On January 20th, 1991, a new president rose to power in the United States. Ronald Reagan became the 40th president of America. Soon after, in 1985, Mikhail Gorbachev came to power in the Soviet Union, and he was very different from the other leaders. On June 12, 1987, President Ronald Ronald Reagan delivered his famous speech at the Brandenburg Gate, from which he said this famous quote: "General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." Gorbachev did a lot of things that many Soviet leaders wouldn't. For starters, he actually listened to Ronald Reagan. The demolition of the wall had officially started on June 13th, 1990, and the oppression of the people of East Berlin had ended. For over a year, the people broke down the wall with whatever they had: sledgehammers, bulldozers. The wall had no purpose. The people were allowed to pass. The Berlin Wall had become a symbol of fear, corruption, and a lack of freedom. But after Gorbachev declared the people free, it became nothing but a line of concrete walls to be wreaked havoc on by the people. Finally, in 1991, the Berlin Wall fell. 30 years. The Berlin Wall stood for 30 years. The people of East Berlin were forced to live under the oppressive rule of communism for 30 years. This wall showed how flawed the communist system was. People were starving and they wanted to get a better life, and the Soviets couldn't do anything about it. All they could do was trap them in. All this ended up doing was killing 239 innocent people, which included 9 children under the age of 16. A quote that perfectly sums up this claim was said by President John F. Kennedy: "Freedom has many difficulties, and democracy is not perfect. But we have never had to put up a wall to keep our people in, to prevent them from leaving us."